I mean, you know the drill. We're here. Maybe if I stop talking about how hard my week has been, it won't be hard anymore. How you been? Spooky Sunday dinners, spooky Sunday dinners, spooky Sunday dinners. Still can't afford a theme song. Hi guys, for those of you that don't know, my name is Johnny Taylor and this is Spooky Sunday Dinners, where every Sunday, every other Sunday, when I'm late Monday, just wait for the Thursday, it's gonna be worth it. We talk about a true crime case that I just really wanna fucking talk about while we make a fairly easy recipe. So if true crime, cooking, and dark humor is your thing, you might want to hit that subscribe button below. We're back. We're here. It's a big week. It's a little bit of a different week. This week, we will be taking a slightly different approach to our case that we're going to cover. This case was recommended to me by my dad, Big Johnny, and I think it's a really fucking great idea. Or a terrible one. The CIA could get me. Yeah, this week we are covering one of the most controversial true crimes to ever happen. And today just happens to be the anniversary of it. Have you guessed what it is yet? Yeah, that's right, Karen. That's right, Boomer. We will be talking about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Fucking yikes, right? And while we do that, we are going to be making one of President Kennedy's favorite meals, steak and potatoes. Super fucking easy. And yes, we will be making our steak on the stove. Go ahead, get it out of your system. You can't hurt my feelings. I feel nothing. So now, you know what fucking time it is. It's Karen disclaimer time. How you been, Karen? Karen disclaimer number 1. These are not professional recipes. I don't have the nutritional facts and they're not really for nutritional value. It is just what I feel like making that day. If you make this and you don't like it, or you fuck up and get sick, it's not my fault. How could you fuck this up? Again, not professional. Scraping mediocre. Karen disclaimer number 2. This is Spooky Sunday Dinners. Emphasis on spooky. We talk about true crime, murder, disease, and all fucked up shit, while we sprinkle a nice little dash of comedy on top, because that's how I cope with being obsessed with something so fucking dark. If that offends you in any way, shape, or form, make sure you want to pick up a phone to call me, maybe email me, direct message me. Let me just let you know, Karen, I don't give a fuck. You can't get me, but maybe the CIA can. Alright, with Karen disclaimers out of the way, I also want to say that this week's episode is a bit different because it was originally 3 hours long. If you know who JFK is, you know this story is fucking long. So with that, I decided to completely rewrite this story, and we will actually be starting from the time that John F. Kennedy became president. Now, before you get mad at me, if you would like to find out where and when he was born, where he took his first shit and went to preschool, there's a Wikipedia page for that, Karen. And if you came here for a presidential history lesson, why? We are going to be focusing more on the assassination itself and the theories that surround it. With that is another disclaimer. I know that there are at least 50 different theories that go into this, and some of them are pretty fucking spot on, while others are complete fucking bullshit. So, we just picked a handful that have been investigated or that I really fucking like, and I don't know, comment below ones that I missed that you want to hear. Maybe we'll do JFK part 2. I don't know. We'll see if I'm even around after attempting to do this. Alright, let's get into what we are going to need. It will also be listed in the description down below as usual. Then we will get into making this meal and this crazy fucking story. First things first, steak of your choice. This is literally the only steak I have been able to secure for the past 3 days. Because fuck all of you for panic buying. And why are you panic buying steak? Both fresh garlic and fresh rosemary. A potato of your choice. Today I'm going to be using some russet potatoes, but this is also really great with all other potatoes. Potatoes are awesome. A pretty good amount of butter or butter substitute. Like always, olive oil. Kosher salt, because we're getting presidential. as well as just regular salt and pepper. So the potatoes we'll be making this week are going to be some oven roasted garlic rosemary potatoes. Oven roasted potatoes actually take quite some time and have to be made at a super high temperature. So the first thing we're gonna do is preheat our oven to 400 degrees and get our potato prepped and ready. Now I have already cubed up my potato and I've had it soaking in some water to release the starches. You want to soak your potatoes for at least 30 minutes, unless you don't want to. I don't care. So now with our oven preheated, we're going to go ahead and dry these potatoes while we get them prepped on the baking sheet. And let's get into the assassination of JFK. So unless you live under a rock, you know that John F. Kennedy was the president. He was a Democrat and was actually pretty well liked all the way around. He had a history in politics that was funded completely by his father. He's from the very wealthy, powerful, and political family, the Kennedys. And he ended up being the youngest president elected in history. He was 43 years old when he went into office. His vice president was Lyndon B. Johnson. And follow along, because this shit's gonna be kind of quick. JFK's administration actually included some high-ass fucking tension with communist states in the Cold War. Because of this, he actually increased the American military advisors in South Vietnam. He also attempted to overthrow the Cuban government of Fidel Castro in 1961. It was that Bay of Pigs invasion, and if you took history class, you know how well that went. And he went on to authorize the Cuban Missile Project in November of 1961. Now, he did reject Operation Northwoods in March of 1962, but his administration, however, continued their plan for the invasion of Cuba in the summer of 1962. We all know the fucking Cuban Missile Crisis, you guys. He did support the African American civil rights movement and was, all in all, like a pretty loved president. I think. I don't know. I'm 25. As most of you know, he had who was my personal favorite first lady of all time, the iconic, the stylish, the one and only Jackie Kennedy Onassis. And besides him doing some shady shit like we've learned all presidents kind of have to do, seemed like everything was going pretty fucking well. Now our potatoes are dry and set out on our baking sheet. From here, we're just gonna chop up some garlic and rosemary to put on top for seasoning. And while we chop this garlic, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this story. Get it? Because we're making meat and potatoes. So on November 22nd of 1963, JFK is in Dallas, Texas. He's there to like smooth over some presidential bullshit and blah, blah, blah. You know how it goes. He is in a presidential limo that is a convertible. So you know, he's top down, cruising through the streets. And we really need to touch on that the route that the motorcade took is just sus as fuck. It's noted to have an unusual amount of turns and have to slow down to like super slow speeds throughout the entire thing. And it's considered really, really not safe. It's also noted that there were about 20,000 windows that faced the motorcade that they knew of before they got there. But because the Secret Service did not have enough men to investigate all of the windows, they opted to investigate none of the windows. Fucking all or nothing, am I right? What's the worst that could happen? So, while taking one of those super slow turns, JFK was shot once in his back, exiting through his throat, and once in his head. There was also said to be one more shot that missed. Governor John B. Connally Jr. was sitting in the seat directly in front of him and was also hit, but survived. The bullet actually went through his back, out, shattered his wrist, and then ended up hitting him in the leg, like in the thigh area. And the official ruling was that 3 shots were fired. And weirdly and luckily enough, this entire thing was caught on film by a bystander in the crowd. His name was Abraham Zapruder, and this will go on to be known as the Zapruder film. And it is super crucial in the investigation, in the conspiracy theories, and it's just, don't watch it. Because of this film, the trajectory that they're able to see, where the bullets went, they decide that they have come from the 6th floor window of the southeast corner of the Texas School Book Depository. this was a building that had one of those windows pointed directly at the motorcade that was right on their route. It was also determined that John F. Kennedy was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. He was an order filler at that book depository, and Lee Harvey Oswald was shot dead by a man by the name of Jack Ruby 2 days later. So, great. And that's the end of the story. Goodbye. Yeah, no. I've got my garlic and rosemary chopped. I'm gonna go ahead and just sprinkle this over our potatoes with a drizzle of olive oil and pop them in the oven for about 30 to 35 minutes. I added a little bit of salt and pepper. We're gonna throw them in the oven and don't fucking think about it. This is the exact amount of time we are going to need to have our steak sit and be salted as well as cooked all the way through. I will be making this steak kind of medium rare, so if you don't like it medium rare, cook it longer. I'm gonna take kosher salt and generously coat both sides of the steak. And let's get into the theories that have been investigated and that I just really wanna fucking talk about. So 1 week after this assassination, newly sworn in President Lyndon B. Johnson created what's called the Warren Commission, and it was led by Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren. And this commission was created to investigate this assassination. The official ruling of the Warren Commission was that Oswald acted alone, was the solo shooter, and there was no conspiracy theories surrounding it. Just a crazy guy, went off, did his thing. Now, it is important that I add that Lee Harvey Oswald did try to renounce his American citizenship in Russia in 1959. He was kind of like a known I hate America kind of dude, a little bit off. He had a past with violence and actually was a trained sharpshooter in the Marines. Some other really interesting facts about him is that he was actually being heavily watched by the FBI at this time, and no one fucking bothered to tell the Secret Service. But on the other hand, the Secret Service didn't even bother investigating the windows or letting the FBI know anything that was going on. This is where the conspiracy is. Did they know that he was going to do it and just kind of let it happen? They end up determining that Lee Harvey Oswald was guilty because of a bullet that was found on the governor's stretcher. Now, this was a bullet that went through 2 people and was whole, no bullet fragments missing from it, completely whole on the governor's stretcher. This was a bullet that matched a gun that was owned by Lee Harvey Oswald. And then they dropped the bomb that Lee Harvey Oswald actually tried to assassinate Major General Edwin A. Walker on April 10th of the same fucking year. This man was known to hate America, already tried to assassinate, I guess, like a bigwig, and was totally free with a gun. Now, our steak is salted. We are going to let it rest before we cook it. While we let it rest, we're gonna go ahead and take a skillet of choice. This is all I have. And we're gonna put it on medium-high heat and let it heat up for a super, super long time. Now, cooking a steak on the stove is a very hands-on way to cook this steak. We're gonna have to work with it a lot and make sure that we cook it as hot as possible. So I'm gonna let this heat up for almost 10 minutes. Now, it's not always talked about, but Lee Harvey Oswald did go on to kill the police chief of that area just 45 minutes after the assassination. Oswald went on to say that he was totally innocent, and the shitty part is, we'll never know if that's true because he was killed only 2 days after, before he got to talk or say anything. And a lot of people think that that was done to keep him quiet, that Jack Ruby had some mob ties, and we're just gonna keep on with these fucking theories, you guys. The Warren Commission ended up shutting that shit down and didn't want to know anything else about Lee Harvey Oswald. And this is also where the magic bullet theory comes from. The Warren Commission fully believes that one of the bullets that was shot went through 2 people, changed trajectories 4 different times, and ended up sitting completely whole on the stretcher. They basically did all of this to swear that there was only one shooter. They then went on to kind of mess with the presidential limousine and say one person was sitting higher than the other. But for a bullet to just zigzag like that, if you're a conspiracy theorist like me, I smell bullshit. I smell sus as fuck. And this segues us straight into the theory of two shooters. Now, if you go back to the Zapruder film, you can see that Oswald would not have had enough time to shoot two different shots instead of the one magic bullet. The time span in which both men were hit was too close together for it to be possible. And this could mean a second shooter was involved. And even Governor Connolly thinks there was a second shooter and is quoted saying that in an interview. But my thing is, what if there was a second shooter, right? But the second shooter had absolutely nothing to do with Lee Harvey Oswald or the CIA or any of it. It was just kind of like, oh my God, are you here to kill JFK too? Oh my God, twins. Oh my God, what's your sign? You're such an Aquarius. Oh my God. They even have a spectator that swears there was a second stray shot and the bullet went into the sidewalk next to him. A fragment came up and hit him in the cheek. There is a mark on the sidewalk that they did determine could have and was probably made by a bullet, but they didn't go on to investigate it any further. And there were only 3 cartridges found next to the gun, right next to that 6th story window. So the amount of cartridges with the amount of shots they think were fired doesn't add up, which obviously is going to segue us into the next theory. Now, this next theory is that there is a totally different piece of footage that was taken that day. It's from a completely different angle, and it shows proof of either a puff of smoke from a gun or a totally separate shooter on this footage. This footage has mysteriously gone missing and takes us directly into the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Now, this is a committee that was created to investigate the assassinations of JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. This particular committee was the last to see this secret footage. And this committee was also in part created because it was determined by a different committee and confirmed that the CIA had purposefully withheld information from the Warren Commission investigation that had to do with JFK's assassination. The committee does believe, after investigating some audio, that there were in fact 2 shooters and that JFK was assassinated as a direct result of a conspiracy. And honestly, this one stresses me the fuck out. The CIA gives me anxiety, but also pisses me the fuck off. Because you're gonna tell me that the CIA is out here recruiting motherfuckers, but never once considered to approach me. I'm angry, I'm offended. The CIA makes me like nauseous. But a lot of fucking people think that this could have been the CIA because they think JFK found out about a plan to assassinate Fidel Castro that the CIA had. There were also claims that JFK was planning to disband the CIA altogether. There's even a theory where 4 high-level agents planned the shooting and fired 4 shots during the assassination. There's also a theory that the CIA actually hired Oswald because of his ties with Russia to make it look like he was a KGB agent, which could be legit. Or we could just go with the theory that some Russian did it, that it was the Russians, because this was mid Cold War, everybody was fucking scared. And we have to remember that Lee Harvey Oswald did try to defect to the Soviet Union. Some people say he really was a KGB agent, and some people say that Russia hired him to look like a KGB agent. But that one just doesn't sit right to me, and it seems too easy. They wouldn't do something that would point the finger right at them. Come on. Alright, so our pan is absolutely hot enough for our steak to go in. Because this first part of searing it is so hands-on, I'm going to focus on searing the steak on either side at super high heat for about 1 to 2 minutes on each side. From there, you are going to take your butter, 2 whole sprigs of rosemary, and 3 crushed cloves of garlic and throw them in the pan. From there, we're going to take a large spoon and baste the steak for about another 5-ish minutes. Apologies in advance, it's going to get loud. This also brings me to my all-time favorite theory surrounding this true crime case. The theory that Oswald worked with CIA operative known as Umbrella Man. I fucking love this theory, and it's not just some special nickname or anything, it's literally a man with an umbrella. If we go back to the Zapruder film and some photos taken at the scene, you can see a man clearly holding an open umbrella. It's not raining that day, and no one else in the crowd has an umbrella even on them. We also need to note that JFK was shot right as the motorcade is passing the Umbrella Man. And just before or right as these shots are fired, the Umbrella Man is seen lifting his umbrella about a foot or so into the air. Some people think that this was a signal for a second shooter, or the umbrella itself was the fucking weapon. I know. Classic. True crime. It's everything I want. They believed that it could have been as the umbrella opened, some like darts or bullets flew out of the umbrella webbing. And I know what you're thinking. How the fuck is that possible? This is so stupid. Well, a Department of Defense weapons developer did go on to testify that that weapon is real. And it's real because he's the one that fucking designed it. Gave them the blueprints and everything. I've gone ahead and seared the steak on both sides. I'm gonna go in with my rosemary, 2 sprigs, all of that garlic and the butter, and continue to baste it for a couple of minutes. Now, this basting process is going to ensure that we get a pretty even cook on this steak. I know that most people do not like cooking their steak on the stovetop, but right now that's kind of our only option. Now, as much as I want the Umbrella Man theory to be true, a man by the name of Louis Steve Witt did go on and testify that he was the Umbrella Man, and that umbrella opening it was just a sign of protest because he was against a lot of the Kennedy family policies. Before we call bullshit, opening an umbrella is actually a pretty normal sign of protest in America and throughout London and the UK. He testified and brought an umbrella into court, I guess, and was like, this is the umbrella, nothing suspicious here. But also, like, you could have brought a different umbrella. Some people think that it's actually Vice President LBJ. It is said that he was angry because Kennedy was the president in the first place and he was trying to further his political gain. There was some theories that at a party he told a woman he was going to do it, but all of that ended up being complete and total bullshit. And other people actually think it was the fucking mob. 3 different mobs or mafia? Mob? Please comment below the correct terminology. But 3 different ones actually took credit for the assassination. And the Kennedys are known to having mob ties. It was also said that Jack Ruby had some pretty strong mob ties as well. Alright, we went ahead and basted our steak for a couple of minutes, and now we're just going to let it rest. I'm going to let it rest with that rosemary and garlic on top of it while our potatoes finish. Now, people also thought that the mob had a lot to do with it because John F. Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy, really tried to fuck over organized crime as the Attorney General. A former, mafia hitman actually went on to admit that he was the second shooter. There was also apparently proof that the CIA was working with the mob to make this happen. There's theories that the mob helped JFK win the election in the first place. I think it's safe to say, and I think, that the Kennedys absolutely have mob ties. But do we think it was the mob that did it? Because I smell some fishy government shit going on. I also went a step further in my research and ended up watching the 3-hour movie, JFK, recommended by my father. Please watch it. And they have the whole 6-shot situation theory that intrigued the hell out of me. But I really want to know. I kind of laid out the skeleton of it, but what do you guys think? Who killed JFK? Who was involved in it? Who was a part of it? And who got blamed for the wrong shit? Our potatoes are just about finished. Our steak is also almost done resting. We're gonna go ahead and plate it. I'll show you guys the fucking meal, and you can let me know what you think. I know that this isn't a super traditional way of making a steak, but I'm trying to do like a work with what you got quarantine thing. I promise it's really good, really juicy. And before you get mad at me, just fucking try it. I don't know. Also, you guys, I'm trying to get a dog right now. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. Sorry, I burped. All right, so our steak has been resting and our potatoes are finally ready to get out of the oven. Now, I did get some new pot warmers and oven mitts, and I fucking love them. Amazon storefront. So, I really want to know, you guys, who do you think killed John F. Kennedy? Who was involved? What stories did I miss? Did I totally butcher this steak and you're offended? Let me know. I mean, Doug likes it. And here we have our presidential steak and potatoes. I think that searing it in the pan gives it a nice brown color on top without cooking it all the way through. And basting it is so important. That's what gives it that evenness all the way through and cooked right to your liking. Thanks for cooking with me today, and thanks for letting me tell you this crazy, insane, all over the place story. Don't forget to comment below future crimes you want me to cover and maybe some recipes you want me to try. Thank you for watching Spooky Sunday Dinners. I am still singing. Still can't afford a theme song. I realized I probably should have made Thanksgiving dinner because of the date.